Welcome to Salt of the Earth. This is Veruschka. I'm in the Big Island of Hawaii, and today I'm speaking with Jeffrey Wium. He's the director and producer of The Wisdom Keepers, Paqo Andino, an eco-spiritual journey into the heart of consciousness, a beautiful, beautiful movie about the Andeans and their tradition with the holy mountains there. Welcome, Jeffrey, and let me ask you, what is your role right now, and where are you going to next?
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. And right now I'm going to be heading out to California and Colorado, and then on to Europe to continue my work of doing activations and transmissions, both with the mountains and people who are ready to kind of embody the next level of memory. Referring to the aspects of what we've forgotten in the West that have taken us out of a holiness, kind of spelled with a W, a wholeness, or a holiness of how we have always operated, but we've simply forgotten over the course of the last thousands of years.
So when you're traveling, who is this really appealing to? What people are showing up?
I found across the world that there's a human condition and a desire to be more conscious, to be more aware and awake in their lives, to live holistically and live in a unified consciousness and even an animistic consciousness where we're relating with the life force that dwells within all aspects of creation. And so regardless of human condition or politics or economics or anything like that, there's a core heart space that is appealed to through the film and through the transmission that it contains. The film was originally made as a means to pass along the wisdom that has been maintained in the Andes for thousands of years, and it's happening at this time because humanity is at a place where we've woken up enough to realize that a lot of the ways that we have been working aren't working any longer, and working in living in separation, living in opposition to each other no longer works. So there's a real common bond in the unified state, and there's a real desire for people to come together and to work as a whole in community. And I find that the film works as a beautiful ambassador to create a transmission or to pass on a transmission, and then from that questions are created, which really leads people on their own personal quest or invigorates, inspires them onto a deeper quest. And so if I can be there to simply pose deeper questions to them, then I think I'm fulfilling my work.
Mm-hmm. So do you feel like in the trail that you leave behind in sharing and showing this, are communities being created in any way?
I believe we're touching people. The answer is yes, and I believe we're touching people individually. You know, one of the things that's important to realize, I find, is that if you want to change the world, just heal your heart, because when you achieve that self-understanding, you begin a process of self-realization. And then no matter where you go or who you're with or what you're doing, there's a sense of divinity or holiness that you're occupying. So if you refer to Mahatma Gandhi, for example, he says, be the example you wish to see in the world. And in that way, when you have a deep, profound experience and you're able to integrate it and have tools and techniques to move beyond suffering, move beyond the trauma or the separation that we've been programmed into, then you're more able to show up as a peacekeeper and a peacemaker instead of in opposition with one another. And then that leads to a form of intimacy, emotionally, an intimacy and a safety, so that we're not scared of vulnerability, for example. We realize it's just simply receptivity. And to honor the woman that receives in order to become pregnant, to give birth to life, we all, man and woman alike, are benefited by opening this space in ourselves to receive the transmission, to receive loving presence. And we just simply show up and invite that by having that loving presence. You can't force anybody to love you, but you can invite a loving space. So I find that regardless of cultural background, people connect with this aspect and then find that light within themselves. So it's not so much creating a trail for others to follow, but instead it's actually inspiring people to blaze their own trail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the heart transcends any of these cultures that are being exposed to it. So are you in contact actively with these Paqos, and are they giving you a message for 2016, or do they offer messages that they receive?
Well, the lineage of Paqo, and I'll explain that Paqo is not a shaman. A shaman is one that works more within matter and works horizontally. For example, takes an aspect that is deemed to be unbalanced and then does certain techniques and healings to bring it into balance. The Paqo, on the other hand, works vertically, which is you see something that's in density and you go up into the unmanifest energy, which is called Iya, and into the eternal realms, or the heavenly realms, if you will, and you pray and you bring down that energy, that light, into the density. And we know, science tells us that there's equal and opposite reactions to everything. So what I'm getting at is the intensity of the light is always equal to the density of the shadow. So no matter how dark you find yourself, no matter how much difficulty you find yourself in, there's always equal and even more energy to bring light and resolution to it. So the Paqos have been trained and held this lineage for tens of thousands of years. And I was initiated in 2007 and became a Paqo, and then went through a series of initiations rather intensely to deal with the density inside myself that I programmed into myself through my upbringing in the United States, and then to come into contact with the mountain spirits and more the celestial realms and terrestrial elements, including Mother Earth, including what the Christians would call angels, and higher celestial beings that help guide us and support our prayers, so that really the work of a Paqo is to work as an intermediary between heaven and earth so that we can better manifest heaven on earth. And the work that we're doing, and we've been tasked to do, is to prepare Western society to make this great transformation that we're going through, and just to be of assistance in that way. So 2016 is a very powerful growth year where a lot of the systems are switching over. Ways that we've been governed and controlled are ceasing to exist. And what that calls us to do is to become very deeply responsible through integrity and through impeccability to occupy a conscious state. So, for example, we're making decisions not only what's best on what is best for us, but what is best for the person in front of us and all around us. So we move from a state of separation into a state of group dynamics in a collective level. And so 2016 is simply going to be the continuation of all the processes that we've been experiencing now. 2015 has been a very intensive year. A lot of stuff coming up for resolution, a lot of stuff for integration, a lot of stuff for letting go of. And for those who are in resistance to those kinds of things, to letting go, 2016 the energies will be that much stronger, so it'll make it that much more intense, if you will, but also that much more powerful, because the energies will be there in order to bring resolution to whatever it is that you're moving through. And then that'll continue on all the way out to 2025, which is the end of a period that's called a kuti, which is a time between eras when the whole world turns over, and that happens every 500 years, and we're in that now.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride for everyone. I mean, it's reflected everywhere. So for the new age Western person who's done it all for the last 30 years, someone like myself who's been at the feet of Eastern gurus like Osho or Guru Mai and Yogananda communities, feeling like, I found the secret, everyone else is alien-like to me, like I've been saved, and being really in love with that Shakti, divine energy, and then going through disillusionment. And I mean, for me, the gift was just finding by default the connection to nature. That was the only thing that was left that felt safe. And then making that connection with springs and Hawaii and the mountains and volcanoes, where it just felt like life was talking to me in that way. What
Yeah.
when I then happened upon a ceremony with the Paqo Indians and their offerings, it was the same experience of Shakti. I was very surprised of how much energy they were transmitting just in their presence or igniting. How's the energy of the Paqos different from the traditional Eastern guru?
Well, it's exactly the same, actually. If you go back far enough in time, you realize that this was standard practice. This Shakti, or Kaozai as it's called in the Anzis, or life force energy, or Ki in Japan, or Qi in China, it's all what makes us and what animates us. It's the life force that's in all things, whether it be a tree or a rock or a river or lightning or a Paqo Indian or a Navajo, it doesn't matter, or a person walking down Madison Avenue in New York City. The key is simply the memory of who we really are. If you go back through time, we've gone through 13,000 years of the shadow, and that refers to a larger galactic cycle where the Milky Way is in a vortexual spiral, and it takes 25,920 years to make one complete lap around itself. Half of that is shadow and half of that is light when we deal with duality, where we live and exist on this planet. So before the fall of man, as it's called in the Christian tradition, or the loss of that animating life force, it was standard practice that everybody operated that way. There was no separation. There was no lack. Everything was in abundance because the natural state of the universe is abundance. And then in this period for the last 13,000 years, there have been the holy people and the traditions that have kept this lineage alive, or this wisdom, this way of being alive. We call them life ways or ways of life. The Paqo Indians, the yogis, the deep practitioners found in Australia, the Aboriginals, the Maori, the Somi people, the Inuits. It doesn't matter who they are. You find people that are called wisdom keepers, and they simply are holding the wisdom that comes from our experience or our knowledge base that we've held over time. And we're in a place where we have separated from that, and we are turning back to realize the value and the relevance of those wisdom keepers or that information in this day. So when I sit at the foot of a yogi or a guru, I'm sitting with someone who remembered, and they have found, like a laser beam, a way to cut through the darkness, like Yogananda did, for example, and can achieve that state of bliss or nirvana or awakening. And in that time that is no longer present, we had to mimic them and do exactly what they did and follow those techniques in order to maintain that laser beam to get through the darkness. Now, that all ended on the solstice of 2012 in December, when we entered into a phase of our spin around the galactic central sun, where we started encountering new energies that supported us individually in order to become collective. So with that, we take the reference points and the guidance of what we might call a teacher, but we have now shifted it into a place where we must do the work ourselves. And so for us to experience that state of enlightenment or bliss or nirvana or awakening or illumination, that comes from within. And the only thing that a teacher can do is simply be a tour guide and point out where one can find themselves in order to address the blockages that are inside. And then instead of seeking something else, learn how to do alchemy and go into that density and bring the light there. Because salvation and all of those terms like that come from within the structures that we've created from ourselves through our personal experience. So if I've had abuse or I've had difficulties that I haven't been able to incorporate or come to resolution with in this lifetime, all of that treasure is waiting there in those densities for me to unlock, because that's my life force and that's my work. And when our body gets sick, it's a way that the body is saying, hey, it's inside. You need to focus inside. Stop looking outside for your salvation or your answers. It's not in changing your name. It's not in buying something new. It lies within the constructs of your experience. And so for me, on my journey, I've had to, it's very humbling, because you have to understand that these places there aren't maps to get to them. The Western culture doesn't support it. It actually does the opposite. It asks you to move away from it, to leave the difficulty and go somewhere else. But yet if you look at all the greats through time that have become illuminated, they're the ones that go right into the density and they shine their light. So what we experience with a yogi or a Karo Indian is simply being in the presence of somebody that's either remembered or never forgotten. In the case of the Andeans, they've just never forgotten. That way of life has continued uninterrupted for tens of thousands of years.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. So what does the mountain provide in contrast? If they're the wisdom keepers, what's the difference of what the mountain as the teacher is providing?
Yeah, well, the mountain is actually a mountain spirit. So you have a celestial being that exists at an energetic level and who has volunteered to come on this planet to do a piece of work or oversee a certain aspect of a realm. And they occupy the highest peaks of Pachamama, or Mother Earth, which are the mountains. So the larger the mountains, the higher the mountains, the more intensity or the more responsibility these mountain spirits, or in the Andes they're called Apus, A-P-U, and plural is S, A-P-U-S. But they, you could call them angels, but you can also call us human angels in human form. So they are simply guides, and they're like transformers that step down power from high voltage cables that's very powerful that our bodies and our nervous systems aren't able to incorporate and work with, and they transmit it down into levels that we can work with. So, for example, when a Paqo goes through the levels of initiation, and there's 13 of them in the Andes, when you get up into the 5th and the 6th and the 7th level, you start working directly with the mountain spirits. Beyond that, if you're called to be a celestial Paqo, then you're initiated by lightning, which basically resets your whole computer, and then you only work with celestial beings as your teachers. You no longer have human teachers. You have peers and mentors, but all of the information and all of the conversation and the instruction happens at another level. So that's really the significance of the mountains.
Yeah, they're so powerful. They really started speaking to me and showing themselves, and I didn't even have any reference points. So, yeah, along those lines, with being indoctrinated in Eastern philosophy and that to go beyond the ego and the body, and it was kind of denouncing this world. I never had like an intentional connection made with the earth or the world around me. It was such a severe, cut and dry type of thing. So it was really hard for me to conceive what the value of sacred sites is, and why should one go to these places on the earth if you're drawn there? Like, why is one drawn there? And how can you explain, how can I explain that without trying, I was led to Mount Shasta or Mauna Kea or Glastonbury or Avebury, all at different times in my life. And now every day I have Ayers Rock just showing itself to me. And I had no idea until I looked it up that it was in the dead center of the continent. It blew my mind. So what is the value of physically traveling to these sites?
Well, it's going into a vortexual energy. Every place has energy, but specific places on the face of the earth have higher levels of energy. So Mount Shasta, the mountains in the Andes, Ayers Rock, Glastonbury, Avebury, the ones that you've mentioned, are all places where the ley lines intersect, or they hold a very strong relationship to starlight, where the energies of the cosmos come down and penetrate into the earth, or the earth energies come up and penetrate into the cosmos. So when you're physically in that field, it's a stimulation to your nervous system. And you can really think of our system as a circuit breaker with some switches on and some switches off. Most of them are off because in our culture we haven't supported those types of interactions or abilities, and so they atrophy and they go dormant for lack of use. And so when you go through whether it be initiations through lineages or traditions or go to sacred sites or both, you're being activated. In the Andes, we call them karpais, and they're like a energetic seed that's planted within the physical body and within the emotions and the mental realms, and then that is watered through daily practice. So everything has its place. And, do we have to make these journeys and go there? No, we don't. Does it make it easier? It can. But really, like you're saying, when you have signs and signals that say, come to Ayers Rock every day, then that's a pretty strong indicator that there's something there for you. So I tend to just listen and get out of my way and, be aware of something which is called embodied imagination, which is the part of my ego that wants so desperately to remove myself from suffering and from the difficulty of day-to-day life that I actually start to make things up in order to get there. So I just take everything with a grain of salt and use a lot of discernment and ask for repeated signs and signals to make sure that I'm not creating this myself. And then just humbly moving towards things so that I can be where I need to be at every moment. And the truth of it is we're exactly where we need to be at every moment, regardless of what we're encountering, because in that exact second lies the opportunity to bring whatever situation, no matter how difficult it is, to grace. And that's really the work is, for me, I understand it as taking the density of this third dimension and bringing the light to it. In other words, bring heaven to earth. So many times in our paths we seek to be something else. And what happens is we actually leave ourselves behind, which is a great trauma, great violence, because we're not in the space of integrity owning all of the light and the shadow. Because the shadow is the compost that we grow the new vegetables from. But we have to, through our consciousness, take our new understanding, our new perception. For example, there may be somebody yelling at me or trying to harm me right in front of me. But if I'm able to see that they're actually asking me to love them, then I'm able to do alchemy and get past my resistance and come to a place of realization that it's my part of myself that wants to be loved, that's screaming in my face. And so as I've worked with different traditions in different places and with different medicines, I've come to understand that whatever it is that I see outside of myself, I need to find it inside of myself and heal it there. And then when I'm able to heal it there, my perspective changes. I can no longer see through the same eyes of opposition. I instead see the opportunity to bring everything to grace, to resolution. And if I can simply show up in that way, moment to moment, as much as I can, then I'm able to show up in that presence and bring that presence to every situation I encounter. And that's the highest, holiest aspect that I feel that I can do. And that's really the work, and that's really what the wisdom keepers in the Andes and other places are doing. They're living the dream. So you talked about Ayers Rock and the Aboriginals. They say that in our waking state, we're sleeping. And in our sleeping state, we're actually awake. So how can I move between those dimensions and in a very wakeful way and become illuminated? To me, illumination happens when you take all of the shadow and all of the light and you integrate it so deeply together that it spontaneously combusts. And we can see that in the example of the yin-yang. We have the white within the dark and the dark within the light. And those magnetics together create locomotion or life force.
Beautiful. I love hearing age-old concepts just with different words, and they're just so, every day I find they're just easier and easier to digest because things are getting simpler and clearer, and how we manifest new messengers, and you finally can get it on another level. It's kind of like the right word is the key to open that up in you. That was a really beautiful reflection.
Thanks. I find finding and creating translation points is the key. So it's not unlike going between languages, German and Chinese, for example, finding the translation point. Between traditions, finding the translation points. Speaking to people that may have a science background or a religious background or a indigenous background. It's using language to invite understanding in the place that there isn't understanding. Really doing mediation between the conflict in order to create harmony.
So how does one know one is a gatekeeper? And people learning this or being drawn to this work or this wisdom, should they strive for this, or is that something that's predestined?
Well, we're all creator, we're all completely awake in one realm of our reality. So it's trying to get all of the blockage out of the way. The only reason we have dis-ease or illness or heartache or any of these states is because there's blockages. There's simply a breakdown in communication between our soul level consciousness and our physical awakening consciousness. So as we go through a process of initiation or understanding or learning, we're learning simply to remove what's getting in the way. There's a saying that says, if you want to know God, get rid of everything you're not. And that's simply not trying to learn new things, but actually understanding that if you strip down to the bare metal of who we are, that is a gateway that opens up into our reality, our multidimensional realities. So it's not to say don't go out and learn techniques and things that can help you deepen your meditation and things like that, but meditation and yoga by themselves will not get you there. They're simply vehicles to keep the body supple and to quiet the mind. Meditation, for example, is a state that helps you become mindful so you can understand there's a monkey going on trying to keep you safe in your head based on the ego. But when you quiet your mind, you're able then to turn to all the multitudes of conversation that are going on within the different realms. And then you start a whole aspect of work that you didn't even know was there before you started meditating. So all these things are vehicles to get you there. And everything has its place. And I say do whatever you need to do for as long as you need to do until you decide not to do it any longer. But I also would say that we could probably use more knives than spoons in our culture because we tend to accumulate things. And I have found through my own process that I have found deeper realms by letting go of the things that no longer resonate with me. Even the attachments or the identification as a Paqo, because, my parents named me Jeff, but that's not really who I am. So if I can move beyond that identification, what I can come into contact with is a deeper way and a deeper understanding that exists beyond just the limitations of that identification, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So how would I know which mountain is my teacher?
Well, you ask. You receive signs and symbols, and you go sit on that mountain. And when that mountain starts talking to you, it'll let you know if it's your teacher. In the Andes, as you work up through the levels of being a Pampa Messiah or a Paqo that works mainly with the earth, and I guess I can explain that briefly because it'll come to answer your question. When you begin at the first level, it's the level of the ego. And the funny Quechua word for ego is actually caca. So you got to deal with your caca, which I just love the metaphor on that one. Not even, it's more than a metaphor. But then you move into dealing with the darkness, or what's called the Laika, and that's all the shadow aspects. And that's a place where we can get hung up because in that aspect we're given access to power very quickly, but it's the dark arts. And it always operates through separation and difficulty. So, excuse me, one needs to quickly move through that and then move on to the realms of plants and minerals and all the different realms that help us to understand the workings of Earth. And then beyond that, you start to come in contact with the mountains and the mountain spirits. And you work through the lower, the middle, and the upper mountains. And then if you're called to be an Ultimasiac or a celestial Paqo that works primarily with the planetary body as a whole and then working off planetary and within the solar systems and the galaxies, and then beyond that, you work with a mountain spirit as a peer or as a collaborator, a compadre, one that assists and brings energy and then works with you to bring about realization. In the Andean tradition, it's a process that takes about 15 years. It's been sped up quite a bit now because we don't have that much time and everybody needs to kind of get on their game. But one of the reasons why myself and my colleagues offer pilgrimages down to the Andes is so that we can open the gate from the level that we're initiated at and give anybody who feels the calling to go an ability to go there and have a direct connection in the physical with these angelic beings that actually come in the room and manifest in physical form and speak to you. So that's a very direct and obvious way to encounter these mountain spirits. The other ways is that you just have the experience like you do, where you start being drawn to Ayers Rock all the time. The key to all of it is the dedication and the quest. And it's not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy, because in doing so, we have to die back to everything that's in the way, all of our identifications, all our codependencies, all of the things that we perceive to be our safety mechanisms, when really safety is one's ability to jump out of the tree and fly it every time and let go of the tree. So there's so much to these questions that we could talk for hours about them, but I think to really be specific about how do you get in contact with your mountain or different elementals is you go out in nature and you spend time in nature. You find a sit spot and you develop that relationship with that sit spot, whether it be a tree or a lake or a meadow, and then use that as a translation point. Use that as an intermediary in order to access the other realms. And that's traditionally how it's been done since time immemorial.
Yeah, that's very well put. Baby steps and new worlds open up. Well, personally for you, where in the process that you're in, and with the metaphor of going up the mountain, do you find that the closer you get to the top, the challenges can become more severe? Like with all of your tool belt and gifts and initiations, what have been some of your personal biggest challenges, maybe this year or this month or this week?
I would say, looking deeply in the mirror and owning everything in my cellular memory and recognizing that everything I see outside of myself is just a reflection of what's inside myself. So as I've been trained and moved up the mountain, so to speak, I realize when I get to the top, that's not the top. That's just the end of the dirt and the rock. And my true existence of who I really am, my origin, lies far beyond that. So you make this journey very humbly and very with much dedication and much commitment to really look and seek. And it's painful, it's powerful, it's rewarding, and it's agonizing at the same time. And a lot of people around you think you're nuts because you're not adhering to the cultural norm. But what I've found is as I'm able to move beyond who I think I am, I actually start to discover who I really am. And that lies way beyond this planet. And then as you occupy that space, you begin to transmit from that place and those origins back into daily life here. And that's simply the work of any person in any tradition that does that dedicated work. And so we're then tasked and given instruction on what needs to happen and where we need to go to do that transmission. So this upcoming year, we just find ourselves in different places. For example, Europe is really hot right now. There's a lot going on, a lot of movement happening there. So we're going to be in Europe a lot in order to help create invitations for realization and self-embodiment, you might say, self-realization. But I'm just a kid from the suburbs that got frustrated with what was available there and sought something different. And that journey has taken me way outside myself and then ultimately very deep inside of myself. And I'm just really grateful for the patience and the information that has come to me. But we all have this in our DNA. It's all sitting in there. It's all that dormant stuff that isn't triggered through our education system, through our cultural system. It's what the wisdom keepers hold for us because they've been stewarding this for millennia, waiting for us, humanity, to wake up to a level of...
Patient.
Yeah, they've been waiting for us to get to a place where we are now, where we can actually choose wisely and hold that responsibility. So we're in an incredible time. As dark as it may seem, it's incredibly light.
It's right at the precipice. But do the Andean think or share in terms of the divine feminine and masculine?
Absolutely. The Andean tradition is the divine feminine mystery school. The Egyptians is the masculine. The Tibetans are the neutral child. So there's a condor and eagle prophecy, which is the condor represents the emotional intelligence and the eagle represents the mental intelligence. And when those two fly together again, which they are now, happened a couple of years ago, humanity will wake up in a balanced state and will no longer be the women oppressing the men like in goddess times, and the men oppressing women in recent times. And so when we're able to look at that and take responsibility for who we are and what we've come in as, then we can stand next to each other. For example, a lot of women are complaining about the masculinity at these times, and the men are complaining about the femininity in this time. And what I have found from the wisdom keepers is that the woman has a responsibility to occupy creation that lies within her. She holds a space in her womb that brings in life force and it births, whether it be a human being or births a project or a batch of chocolate chip cookies. There's a divinity that moves through that. And when woman stands in that essence and in that power, then and stops asking man to protect and take care of her, then the man and his spear can stand next to her, and that spear bends over and becomes a shepherd's hook, and then can shepherd consciousness. And then between them, between that sacred masculine, that sacred feminine, there's the sacred womb. And through that portal, all great creation happens in the balance of the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine. So it's really up to all of us to take our individual orientations and heal it and bring it to the center point, bring it into harmony, so that we can get past this state of separation and this fear we have for each other and get back to that intimate state of grace that we came from. And that's a deep part of remembering. And what I've found in the wisdom-keeping traditions, the ones that have never been broken, they don't have any of the pathologies we have around our sexuality. They don't have the pathologies around separation or fear. For example, in the Andes, they don't even have the word to have in their language. So there's no possession. And imagine a world paradigm where there's no possession. You're just simply with something. So everything works in harmony. It's a completely foreign concept to us, but it's alive and well in these traditions, and that's part of what they hold. And so, some of the programs we're doing now is called Heart Wisdom in Daily Life, and that's simply how do you occupy this space? How do you, relearn the maps of consciousness so you see the opportunities that's presented in everything around you, and then be able to walk that as consciously as possible, moment to moment, knowing that your own realization is going to come from your own experiential reality. And that's ultimate responsibility. And to me, that's where we're at right now. No one's going to do it for us. We have to do it ourselves.
Yeah. Well, in my experience, mostly women are more in touch with their pain, so they're the ones who I'm observing are being more proactive about dealing with their feelings.
Absolutely.
So I've really been wanting to hold the space for safety for the divine masculine to step up more and have that space. And I love how you describe both of them and the energy of that. What do you think needs to happen for men to be more open to take that responsibility for their inner power?
Well, there's a whole different conscious paradigm that we need to remember how to operate by. For example, out of this idea of possession, outside of this idea of scarcity or separation. If we look at our common culture, day-to-day business world, it's based on a militaristic, conquering, dominant way of being, and that just doesn't work. If you go back to the traditional tribes, even the Hawaiians, they're in a matriarchal society. They're in a communal sense. They go fishing for the village. They don't just go fishing for themselves. So really our ancestors and our ancestral ways are the keys that open these locks that we've created for ourselves in modern times. And I think the sacred masculine is just going to take a lot of courage to step up and be the only fish swimming against the stream. If I give a workshop out of 50 people, maybe 10% is male. But I found in recent years it's about 50-50 right now. And
amazing.
It takes the man and the woman to both own their part of it. As I mentioned before, the woman steps into her power, and then the man can instead of standing in front of her, protecting and controlling, he can stand next to her. As the man steps out of violence and sets down all the weapons, including the mind, because that's the most violent weapon of all, then the woman has the safety that she can stand next to him. And together we can do that sacred dance together. We can step out of these constructs of you can only love one person, and you can actually be in love, because love is what fuels the universe. And when we can sit in that loving presence, outside of sexuality, outside of awkwardness, outside of fear, outside of abandonment, Then we're getting somewhere step by step, but it takes each one of us individually in our courage to step forward into a place that's a little bit uncomfortable to find the comfort. And that's the alchemist. That's going into the shadow to find the light and bringing the light to it. Remembering that the density of the shadow is equal to the intensity of the light. And that's just, that culturally needs to be supported in ways that hasn't been culturally supported. And that's really what I call the New Earth and New Earth education. And so some of the programs that we're offering, I would say the majority of the work now in 2016 and beyond is specific to healing the masculine and the feminine, because that's really the work that has to be done on the planet. And starting to step outside of the cultural impasses that we've come to learn to operate under. For example, in Norway, there's a cultural saying that says, "Don't be too happy," which sounds ridiculous, but that's something that's trained into people from birth. And you find in the Netherlands, they say, "Don't grow up above the hedge," which is a passive-aggressive way of saying, if you grow up too big, we're going to chop your head off. And, there's these kinds of things that take the individual and the group consensus to stand up and say no. And what we see in the world at this time is you see all of this made-for-TV movies to keep people in their fear, whether they be the false flag attacks in Paris or you see what's going on in Syria or other locations. Those things are happening because they want to keep people in fear. But what's happening, and it's backfiring now, because people are immediately standing up and saying, no, I am not going to hate, I'm going to love. And so it's very ironic that the deepest, darkest shadow is actually the fuel for the brightest light right now. And that's how I can see that humanity is waking up in the world. And so we just simply have to do that. We have to take it into our families and into our relationships, into our schools, into our boardrooms, into our day-to-day business. And it's just going to be the courageous one that reaps the reward.
Well, it takes a lot of courage. I mean, this is what I want to talk about is the practical applications of, for instance, a few weeks ago, here I am at the edge of the world and doing art alongside a woman, and she gets a phone call. She was raised in Paris, and her sister calls and says, "I'm home, I'm okay." This is before, the news even broke to us. She said, "I was invited to this concert, and I felt weird, so we left." And when we went to a cafe, and that's where the incident happened, and police drove them home. So the miracle of hearing the person that this just occurred to, their friends made it out, but they were completely in shock, walking the streets for days. What are the practical applications you would give to these people facing shock, facing fear of going out in the streets? What are some of the first steps?
Reconciliation, really understanding and grieving the experience that is stored within the cellular memory. All of us contain all of the wars, all the battles, all of the attacks that we've ever done to anyone, everywhere, anywhere, throughout time, space. So that's a very powerful force that sits within each one of our cells. And so there's a time of grieving that must be allowed and supported in a way not to condemn another, but to support one to go on their sacred quest. The Aboriginals have their walkabouts, and you have your vision quests and things like that. So when you have a deep traumatic event, it's a catalyst, and if it's handled in a way that is supportive of the deeper awakening, then you have this tremendous potential to take all that energy and bring it to the light. If it's put in a mindset of domination and retaliation and warfare, you've actually lost. Because as soon as you start a battle, you've lost, whether that be fighting against anything. We've got to work in a very a new way. So, we can fight against GMOs, we can fight against pollution, we can fight against all these things, but understand we've entered the fight. We're in the battle and we've lost. And that's not the place of the peacemaker. So it's to those that have done this work, their responsibility then is to be out in the world or in their communities, just like the kahunas or the kapunas are, and holding a space, the meta position above the tantrum of what's going on in the Greek tragedy of the opposition between wrong and right. And as our world starts to see the value of these things, we'll start to look at what we call tragedy in a whole new way. And I don't mean value and there's a goodness that comes out of them, but in sense, I'm saying what is the gift of any situation? So the gift of the attacks in Paris was a strengthening of the resolve amongst the people of this planet not to go to war, to not put up with it anymore, to deal with the powers that have been instigating these types of things. And when you get down to the individuals like the people you're talking about, it's really taking this understanding, wow, it just didn't feel right, so we left. And we went to the cafe, and then we encountered it there as well. Following that intuitive, following that grace, understanding that we're put in a situation, we put ourselves in every situation for a specific reason. And that specific reason is to have a catalytic event so that we can take what is stuck within us and move it to grace. Mm-hmm. And most importantly, to stop looking through the eyes of right and wrong, good or bad. He did, she did, you know.
That's right there. That is an amazing teaching right there. And it's a hard, that's an extremely enlightened way to look at it. But I think that what you're saying, that's one of the first steps to bring it into a neutral position. And I think that the Western world really has no tools to deal with their emotions. You know, how do they rapidly move out of grief or even allow themselves to grieve or move out of fear?
We've been trained out of it.
So
we've very much been trained out of it in that way. If you look at Indigenous cultures, when somebody in the tribe is having an emotional breakdown or a deep event like that, it's recognized for what it is. It's a visioning event. And so somebody may have a mental break, but they're held in a sacred space by the entire collective, specifically by the medicine people, so that they can go and receive their vision. You might have a deep hallucination from a deep fever, but in that hallucination there's a message that comes through from the other aspects of yourself that you're not paying attention to, the soul level aspect, the interdimensional aspect. And those are communications that are happening. And those are often, if you think about it, when you go through illness, you go through accident, you go through heartbreak, those are the times when you have deep capacity. You always have capacity, but it's right in your face to look deeper into the situation, and you make adjustments in your life. It's just a very painful and difficult and expensive way to go through it. So I think for the West, re-education, or looking at the way we educate ourselves, looking at the indoctrination of things, those are all things that we're addressing and will continue to address and need to address in order to move into a deeper holistic understanding of what we are as human beings. And this is part of all the prophecies in the Indigenous tribes. They recognize at this time we'd be going through these certain things and going through these trials and tribulations, and what's called the kuti, or the time between eras, when everything falls apart and all the institutions that we relied on for our guidance we recognize no longer work. And at that time we then have to look into ourselves and amongst ourselves for the answer.
So in relation to even being in your body and being safe in your body and being comfortable in your own unique embodiment, you mentioned that part of your original path was coming to Hawaii and learning lomi lomi, an ancient practice of Hawaiian massage. How important do you think that this type of method or touch or massage is for people to experience?
I think touch is incredibly important because that's part of the program of separation, is this lack of touch or the sexualization of touch. When you look at the deep practice of lomi lomi, it's basically praying through your hands and bringing the spirit of creation through as a transmission. So a lomi lomi practitioner or a Paqo is just a translation point that helps facilitate heaven on earth. So, what I learned with Auntie Margaret on the Big Island is with me to this day. I don't do lomi lomi per se, but the structure and the deeper understanding is a part of my life every day. And that's true of yoga or Reiki or any number of trainings, or all trainings that are out there. I think the work of the individual is to really use discernment and recognize what aspects of everything that they know resides in grace, resides in this holiness. And what resides in separation? A way to look at that might be there's a constant battle between the temporary state of being and the eternal state of being. And the temporary state is associated with the ego, and that it always recognizes that it's always going to die to the eternal aspect. So it's always at war with the eternal aspect. And that's why we resist sometimes our healing. We resist a situation. We resist to find harmony and healing in an atrocity, because that's a temporary identification and a false safety where we can reside trapped, which eventually leads to heartache or disease or any other number of ways that consciousness uses unconsciousness to wake up, because consciousness and unconsciousness are allies. And if one isn't working, the other one's going to work to achieve the same result. All pathways lead to the same place, whether you drop your body in the process of doing it or not. And the ancient traditions or methodologies are ones that understand this and work in that way. Some of the newer ones have become hybridized. There are certain teachers that have gone to the Andes and created hybridized methods. And so they'll draw pieces of information from different traditions and plug it in. It's kind of like making a jigsaw puzzle by taking pieces from a bunch of different jigsaw puzzles. But in the end, the picture isn't clear. So I've found that the ancient traditions are powerful because they maintain the original access and the original map of consciousness. And so I've found that through my process of learning, I've had to let go of a lot of things because they just don't resonate once you get to a certain place. And that's what I mean, let go of everything that you're not. You have to understand that my identification as a masseuse may need to let go because I'm going to start working with energy medicine. And I can use energy medicine within my massage practice, but relying solely on the massage practice no longer works because it's like pushing a rock uphill. It's a lot of work. If I can work at the energetic level, it's a lot less work. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, but it also sounds like it's a good place to start in the healing process too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's not so much learning how to do different things. It's learning how to look deeply at yourself and unwind or do alchemy within yourself, so that when you go into a given situation, you're not slave to the reaction of your ego that says, I'm trying to protect you based on what happened yesterday, so I'm going to tell you to leave this or get angry at that or not listen to this. But instead we intercept that thought form when we say, okay, I understand. This is the monkey that's trying to keep me safe, and no judgment to monkeys. It's just the monkey mind. And I understand you're trying to keep me safe, but when in doing that, you're preventing me from experiencing something new. So if I ease myself into a place where I'm uncomfortable based on my own thought forms, it may be based on my experience. I'm not saying go in and do things stupid, but go up against a discomfort and hang out there. And what you'll find is comfort. The comfort comes out of the discomfort, and pathways of lomi and various things, they take you there. You know, yoga takes you there. It's like yoga. You go up against your edge of where your muscles are strained and your tendons are strained. You back off 5% and you hang out there as long as you can and breathe deeply and stretch into it. It's no different than the mind. You go into a place where you're conditioned by your culture, your society to operate a certain way. You back off a little bit so that you can breathe, and you just hang out there. You know, I remember years ago being in Seattle and hanging out with homeless people, because I find a lot of enlightened people living on the streets. And, you know, these people got in a fist fight right in front of me, and the guy I was hanging out with just said, that's not your fight. You don't have to leave. You don't have to be scared. You can just hang out. It'll resolve itself. That was profound teaching from a man who most people would just look at and blow off as some no good person.
I can imagine that, because they've gotten themselves to like an equal ground. Like they've mastered the art of survival in that way, and I'm sure that the dynamics they settle themselves. I can imagine that was amazing teaching ground. Well, from the body and the mind, let's chat about starlight. You know, I live under a blanket of starlight here, and I feel small and confronted and shy sometimes when I step out into this night sky. It can be ominous. I was really struck when I got one of those necklaces from the Paqo Indians that had the white beads, and they were like, these are the stars. And I was really struck because I wasn't really familiar with them being all honored in that way. What do you feel like is the shortcut to sharing this concept of how we best connect to, remember, and honor this light source?
Well, that's one of the major disruptions in humanity is we've lost our relationship with starlight. Starlight is a celestial force of information that we have separated ourselves from. So we live under roofs and we don't go out at night much because the dark has become scary. And it's no different than the cosmic womb that we're healing right now between the masculine and the feminine, is this place that's undefined, that is misunderstood and is ridiculed and pushed away. When the cosmic womb is when we look at the dark night, that's what that is. So it exists outside of ourselves and it exists inside of ourselves. So the more we can come to understand and harmonize with that womb inside of ourselves, whether we're a man or a woman, it doesn't matter, then the more we're able to enter into that space of darkness and mystery. We're more comfortable out under the night sky. You know, the indigenous tribes, they exist under the night sky. They understand the incredible source. That's where all ceremony takes place. That's where when you do pieces of work, you open up your sacred bundles and you leave them out to absorb the starlight at night, and then close them before the sun comes in order to store that starlight. So I would say for us, it's getting to understand the shadow inside of us, those dark places that I talked about, and not be afraid of them, but understand there's a lot of stars in there. There's a lot of memory. I referred to the yin and yang. So if you're into the dark part of the swirl of the yin and yang, inside that is the white pearl. Inside of every negative situation, every negative projection or perception of our experience lies the light. Within the lead is the gold. And we as alchemists just need to learn how to navigate these things. And that's one of the things we do in the programs, is we teach that map of consciousness. So one understands how to move from unconscious incompetence, where you don't know what you're doing, and that's a very dangerous place, into a place that the ego doesn't like, which is conscious incompetence. You know, we don't like that we learn that we don't know what we're doing, because then we're afraid we're going to lose our job, we're going to be ridiculed, we're going to be, any number of things. But we can't get to conscious competence where we know what we're doing by thinking about it unless we pass through that stage. And then beyond that, when we get to mastery, when we stop thinking about it because it's normal, everyday life, it becomes unconscious competence. And this journey to the starlight is no different. It's understanding that we've simply separated from something that's very powerful. And I'll use the direct link to the cosmic womb, where all life is born and all potential is stored. The void is not empty, it's completely full, right? So as we move into this way, we start to understand the potential, and then we understand our place in creation, which is to manifest creation as a co-creator. And that takes a lot of consciousness, and that's why it's taken so long for us to get to this place, because for so long we've been misusing those powers, and we've been controlling each other and hurting each other. But now, through these events that seem negative, whether it be a Paris bombing or a beheading or anything like that, or a car accident or a divorce or whatever, we have the opportunity to see the light within it, which is to pick the star out of the cosmic womb and bring it to life. So when I go outside and I look at the stars, or if I'm wearing a Caro necklace, I see the star stitched within their weavings. I'm reminded, there's the potential and there's the opportunity. Right. How can I bring this to earth? How do I bring heaven to earth? How do I look at this situation and see the opportunity that's held within it? And that's the easiest way. It just takes some training, and it takes some dedication and courage, and most importantly, a group of people around you, a community that supports that. It's hard when you start to awaken and everybody around you thinks you're crazy, thinks you're nuts.
Yeah. I think that's one of the hardest things that most people are facing, especially in this computer age, is just that separation and isolation. And as they're changing, I mean, I know for myself that to be true, things falling away, and you have to stay vigilant and know what's true in your heart, no matter if no one agrees, but it's hard when you do not feel supported. And, you know, most people who are interested in personal growth in my network are all in scarcity, and everything revolves around money and their ability to do the things they would like to do or not do. So if someone wanted to go, this is the scarcity thing is like the fear that runs, is still stuck in people's bodies and minds. And, you know, if someone wanted to go to Peru, they would say, oh, that's nice, but, you know, I can't afford that experience. And, you know, and as far as
Peru to the Big Island.
Well, what advice would you give people to start a practice when they're completely in scarcity? And I don't know, when you just mentioned the programs you're doing, are these programs in person, or are there books, or is there anything you can say about that?
Yeah, I'll start in reverse order there. There's no books. None of this is written down because it's an oral tradition. You know, the internet is a beautiful tool, because then we have webinars and broadcasts. There's any number of people out there that are doing good work that you can tune into. As far as coming in person, one of the tasks that I've been given is to go out in the world and do the experiential ed, if you will, the quest and the pilgrimages and the retreats in different locations, not only for the people, but also to activate the mountains and help the people reconnect with the mountains. So the Big Island, Mauna Kea, Mauna Loa, Haleakala on Maui, Ga'ala on Oahu, Waialeale here on Kauai, in South America, in Africa, in Europe, in Asia, in Japan, in Australia, New Zealand. It's going global. And so if you're able to attend any of these programs, and then you're able to attend the program. But really the ability to attend the program comes from the mindset of scarcity. And so if we have lived for eons of time with cellular memory and persecution, we tend to hide our star beingness, if you will, behind a veil of secrecy. And what I have come to understand is that as I'm able to do the work in spirit pays the bills for me. And I went into an agreement a decade ago with that, where they basically just said, you do the work, we'll pay the bills. And I agreed, and it's happened. So I'm going to have to say that it's up to each individual to recognize that they're the one generating the thought form of scarcity. And they're in a belief that says, I can't do it, or I can't afford it. Or if I do this, then I'm sacrificing myself. And that's a really sobering thought to own and to be with. And, you know, it is difficult in times to find right livelihood. But understand that if we stand outside of an organization and yell at them or avoid them versus go within and change them from within, they're totally different ways of operating. So you're able to bring that graceful holiness to any situation, and the darker the environment, the more they need it. So I'm not saying sacrifice your values or your morals to do something, but don't be afraid to go into a place that seems dense and shine your light. You know, there's no longer the time of the witch trials and being hung and things like that. You might be laughed at. But one of my teachers said, you know, the most powerful camouflage these days in business is a three-piece suit, because you can walk into any boardroom and never be seen for who you truly are. But you can sit in there in your intelligence, and you can sway opinion by being the presence of God. And that's powerful medicine. And so that can apply in the classroom, in the boardroom, in the car repair shop, you know, wherever it is you find yourself. It just takes the courage to be the example. And when people are afraid, they're going to ridicule because they're not comfortable doing it themselves. But that's what Gandhi showed us, and that's what Yeshua showed us, and that's what Buddha showed us, and all the greats that have come to show us how this is done. They're not the only ones. They're just simply saying, like Yeshua did, he said, these things and more ye shall do. meaning in 2,000 years when my ministry is complete, which is now, all of you will be occupying the space that I'm occupying. And to someone that's deeply religious, that might be blasphemous. That might go against the code of what was written in the Bible. But you got to realize that Bible was altered back in the Council of Nicaea, and everything was changed in order to disempower it. So you just got to do your homework and go back far enough and realize that, actually we're operating this way, and that's what these wisdom-keeping traditions hold for us. So for me to be able to humbly come out and offer information or transmit energetics and flip switches, I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity, and I'm deeply grateful that, my food is put on the table for my children in doing that work. And I just encourage everyone to come to an understanding of how they can bring that light to any situation and, be that grace. And I guarantee you'll be met there, because that's the way it works. If you sit in the, I am not sure and I'm not comfortable doing this, you're going to be met with that uncomfortableness. But when you go into that courage and you go into that grace, you're met with exactly what you put out, and tenfold at that, 100-fold at that. And you just simply have to ask for assistance. We're the ones that have created this idea that we're all alone and we have to do it all ourselves, and it's just not true. If you look at the Hawaiians, they're based on a culture that is village-based. You look at the Karo Indians, you look at any of the Paqos and all of the cultures in South America, they're all based on communal functionality. So we can't do it alone. And little by little, you will come out of the scarcity mindset and realize there's abundance. Someone may not pay you in dollars, but they'll pay you in potatoes.
Yeah. I mean, there's value in all forms. Well, on the flip side of that, if you had all the money in the world right now, what would you do with it?
I would do exactly like the creators of Facebook are doing. They just gave away $45 billion in all their stock for New Earth education, and so that the world can be a different place for their child that was just born. I would basically level the playing field. I would look at Gravity Payments, the CEO in Seattle that raised everybody's base rate up to $70,000 a year in order to function at a base level in Seattle, and dropped his salary from $1.1 million down to $70,000 to meet them. I would absolutely level the playing field. There's no reason for one person to be making an extravagant amount and somebody else starving. There's no reason that, to me, paying for $1 million to make some race car to go round and round in a circle so we can go faster doesn't make any sense. Put food on the table. There's some very basic things that we need to look at a society that are going to shift, and that's all part of this Panchakuti, and that's all been written in the stars a very long time ago. So I would just simply operate in a horizontal tradition versus a hierarchical tradition, so that we recognize everyone as equal and we accommodate them as that, and then we interconnect and we create an interdependence on each other, so that, it's like a conductor of a symphony. He or she doesn't have to be a virtuoso in every instrument, but can rely on the instrumentation of every other person in order to facilitate this greater vision. So I think I would just be very happy to help distribute whatever is necessary for each individual, and then create education opportunities so that people can come away from scarcity-minded things, hoarding and separation.
Yeah, from me to we. Your words, I feel like, are doing a transmission right now, and I can really appreciate even just the symphony of what you're transmitting. What lights you up?
Oh, gosh. Looking at my children, looking at the river. It's thankfully these days going into the most difficult situations, and, when someone's screaming at each other. Just the other week at a farmer's market, some guy was late to the farmer's market, and some other guy parked in the access road so that guy could get to his booth so he could sell his vegetables. And the guy who was to sell vegetables slashed the tires of this guy who parked in his way, and they had a big confrontation right in the middle of the farmer's market. And I was holding my 3-year-old in my arms, and I looked at a friend. I said, "Can you take, my kid for a second?" And I walked over right between the two of them, and they were screaming at each other. And I just said, "Okay, let's get to the bottom of this. What's going on?" They explained their situation. I said, "Okay, you recognize it wasn't good to slash your tires? Yeah. Okay, you're going to need new tires, right? How much is it going to cost?" "It'll cost $150 or whatever, $400 to get new tires." And, "Okay, you willing to pay him?" "Yeah, absolutely." "Why did you do it?" "Because I was frustrated." "Okay, where did that come from?" He said, "I just have a lot of frustration inside because I just got out of the Army. And what I saw in the Army absolutely disturbed me, and I'm so sorry, but it vented through the violence that I was trained to do, and I deeply apologize." And I said, "So you good?" "Yep." "Are you good?" "Great." Can you guys hug each other? Recognize it's just an encounter, and that you can get on to selling vegetables and you can get on to buying vegetables. In fact, how about you give him a bunch of vegetables for slashing your tires? Cool? Y'all good?" And it was resolved, right?
And they
in
were
fact,
completely open to you mediating right away.
Because I walked up with an open heart and I looked him in the eyes as a human being, and I said, "I see what's going on, and I don't damn you for it. And how can I love you? Because you're really asking for love. Because you're upset that you're late. You're not going to make enough money selling your vegetables, and this guy parked in your way." Okay. It was an opportunity to express something, and we can all come together as brothers and get on with it. And so it helped at the individual level, and it helped at the communal level, because everybody at the farmer's market was watching this battle. And I hope everyone in the farmer's market came away with a nice piece of fruit. And so what lights me up is to have the opportunity to be walking down the street and see something and say, how can I help bring this to grace? That's the biggest gift that anyone can give me, right? Because I get so much out of it, because I get the chance to get past my own fear, of someone yelling at me, get past my own fear of not being good enough, because it happens through experience, right? The Buddha said, fall down 7 times, get up 8, right? Which means if you slash someone's tires, stand back up, own it, pay for it, be responsible, and then hug that person and say, get Pono with them and say, I'm sorry. And then you've created grace instead of conflict. You've actually taken the energy and the cellular memory of conflict from him being in the Army on the front lines in Afghanistan and taken it to grace in the farmer's market through an act of violence. And to me, that's why are we here, right? To bring heaven on earth.
Well, Spirit just paid my heart bill. You have me in tears. I think this is a beautiful model of everyday practical confronting the situations instead of having the patterns keep going of conflict.
And that's why it's so important. Let's say one thing. It's so important when I say be the example you want to see in the world, to have the courage to stand in your own loving presence and invite other people there so that they have the opportunity to go there when they're afraid, because we're just afraid of being hurt and we most want to be loved. And that's it. It's as simple as that. And it's everything that I've learned has distilled down to that one simple thing. And that's really, if you can do one thing well, treat yourself well so that you have enough overflow that you can show up and treat other people well. And I'm still learning that. I'm sucking on my thumb.
These are the new muscles of the new earth.
It's the sacred masculine.
Well, I'm so grateful to share with you today, and so honored to share everything that you've been sharing. And this is exactly the message that this world needs to hear right now. What do you feel like has a higher vibration? The practice of gratitude or sending blessings to other people?
There's no difference. Love shows up in any form. Love is what fuels the universe. It is the default. It's the bedrock of everything. And we just find ourselves in a state of separation or fear. We're afraid to be hurt if we experience love. So, whether you're saying prayers or you're selling vegetables or you're cleaning a house or you're sitting in a boardroom or fighting a fire, it's how you do it and how you bring yourself to that gracefully. And that's the highest gift you can give, not only to yourself, but you're giving it to everything, right? And about a year and a half ago, there was a switch in things where we no longer had to pray specific to one thing in order for it to be received, but instead when you pray and open that dialogue out to creation and you do these graceful acts, it affects everything everywhere in a much more profound way. So if you're in a small town or a small office or a small something, it's not small at all. It's everything. So you just have to come to the understanding that the butterfly in Mexico, flapping its wing, is affecting the typhoon in China. You know what I mean, to use that saying?
Yeah. I mean, it is the power of intention.
Absolutely.
And I call it the call and response, too, that if we put out the call or the intention or the prayer or the question, if we're needing help or assistance, that just putting it out internally, that the universe has to respond to you, and there will be an immediate shift.
Yeah, it's not that it has to. That's actually the way it works. And we've just forgotten that you ask and then you're given. It's just you're not given when you're in a selfish mind or you're in a dominating or a state of separation, because the eternal doesn't go there. The eternal meets you in eternity. So one must take themselves to the eternal aspects of themselves and work in that state, and then you're in harmony with all and you're supported by all. So there's a little bit of deprogramming to do, that we find in our education systems, in our governance, and in our corporate structure. But these structures are not the evil incarnate. They are simply just a structure we've been using, and we wake up and realize it doesn't work. So instead of fighting it, we just go out and we choose something different. And like everything that atrophies, when you don't use it, it just goes away. Simple as that. It's exactly what humanity is doing at that time. They're saying, no, we're not going to war. We're going to be in peace. But the other thing to understand is that peace is a reaction to war. It's still a state of duality. So it's very important to move beyond that state of peace into the state of eternity, where everything dwells and where everything is come from and everything returns. Whether you make it there holding this body or not isn't really that important, but at the same time, that's what we're doing this time around. So that's why there's so many species watching us go through this right now.
So to close this, what does salt of the earth mean to you?
Everything we've been talking about.
Well, as far as the beautiful piece of work that I'm sure you had to face all your fears to bring to life, the Wisdom Keepers, Paqo Andino, how do people find it? How do they have a chance to view it, either in person or online? And, how do they connect with you?
You can go to the website, which is paqoandino.com, PAQOANDINO, or you can just Google Wisdom Keepers and it'll come up. And that site is a portal that on the navigation bar you'll see a link that you can watch it online. You can download it digitally or you can purchase a DVD. The music is a powerful transmission. That soundtrack is available as well. And then if you go onto the retreat and the schedule pages, you'll see where we are in the world in the coming months. And every year we go once or twice to the Andes, which is a 9-day pilgrimage. It's explained on the page what we do. And coming up, we'll be at Mount Shasta, and then I'll be with Deepak Chopra in San Diego at a conference in 2 weeks. And then we'll be out in Boulder, Colorado. And then back on Kauai, and then from there we'll be in Europe in a number of countries, and then down to Peru, over to Japan, and really being asked to take it globally now to help facilitate and activate the people and the places, the holy places, and always open to invitation. People have a strong call, then they reach out and ask us to do something somewhere. The key is to just bring people together at a collective level so that we can do the bigger work to help heal this planet, or I should say bring it into a more harmonious state. As we wake up person to person, we come back into community, we do that.
And when is your next trip to the Andes?
The first 10 days of April. And that information is on the website. And then there'll be another retreat in Colorado in late June, early July, and then we'll do one in Austria in August. And I think that is it. There's also a retreat up in an institute called Hollyhock in British Columbia. out on Cortez Island. That's going to be in October. But all that information is online.
And you'll be coming to Hawaii soon, too.
Well, yeah, I live
Big
here,
Island.
so I'm all... sure. Sounds like someone's inviting me. Oh, yeah, I'm going in March.
Yeah.
There'll be I think it's a 6-day program with Elizabeth Jenkins that I'll be there with a carol.
Wonderful. Well, it's been so heart-opening to share with you. Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to experiencing this new Earth transition.
Likewise, I'm just deeply grateful for being asked to show up and have the conversation.
Okay. Mahalo, and have a beautiful rest of your year.
Likewise, alohanewearth.